High school was over. Done. Finished. For 13 long years, our lives had been ruled by bells, textbooks, and the dreaded pop quiz. Now, standing on the other side of graduation, the summer of 2025 stretched out before us like an endless highway. It was a blank map, and we held the pens. No more homework, no more waking up before the sun. For the first time, we were truly free, and the feeling was electric. We had worked hard, survived the final exams, and tossed our caps into the air with a triumphant roar. That feeling of pure, unfiltered possibility was something I'll never forget. It was the kind of freedom you only read about in books, and it was finally ours. My friends and I, Alex, Mia, Sam, and me, Jake, had been a tight-knit group since kindergarten. We had navigated the treacherous waters of middle school dances, the drama of high school sports, and the stress of college applications together. This summer was meant to be our victory lap, a final grand adventure before we all scattered to different corners of the country for college. We spent the first few weeks just basking in it. We had late-night bonfires, binged entire seasons of TV shows in a single sitting, and talked for hours about the future. But we all knew that wasn't enough. We needed something bigger, something memorable to mark the end of an era. The air was thick with the scent of freshly cut grass and the promise of long, sun-soaked days. We felt invincible, as if nothing in the world could touch us. The future was a bright, shimmering horizon, and we were racing toward it without a care in the world. Our parents, seeing the relief on our faces, gave us the space we craved. They knew this was a special time, a fleeting moment between the structure of childhood and the responsibilities of adulthood. We were in that perfect golden in-between, and we planned to make the most of every single second of it. The world was our oyster, and we were ready to find the pearl. We brainstormed dozens of ideas for our grand adventure. A trip to the coast? Too expensive. A music festival? Too crowded. We wanted something that was uniquely, something that would test our limits and give us a story to tell for years to come. We craved the quiet thrill of nature, the challenge of a physical feat, and the reward of a breathtaking view. The idea had to be perfect, a capstone on nearly 2 decades of friendship. Little did we know we would get a story to tell, but it wouldn't be the one we were hoping for. Our quest for the perfect memory was about to take a very, very dark turn. In our corner of Wyoming, there was an unwritten rule, a rite of passage for every graduating class. It was a tradition as old as the dusty roads we drove on. The challenge was to climb the sheer red cliffs of the Flaming Gorge Reservoir. The reward? A panoramic view that made you feel like you were on top of the world, looking down on creation itself. For years, we had heard stories from older siblings and friends who had made the pilgrimage. They spoke of the exhilarating climb, the camaraderie, and the profound sense of accomplishment that came with reaching the summit. It was more than just a climb. It was a symbol of our transition into adulthood. Alex, the undisputed leader of our group, was the one who officially proposed the idea. He had a beat-up but beloved Jeep Wrangler, the kind of vehicle built for dusty trails and rugged terrain. He had been talking about this trip since we were freshmen, dreaming of the day he could drive us all out there. Mia was the planner, the one who made sure we had enough water, snacks, and a proper first aid kit. Sam was the eternal optimist, the guy who could find a silver lining in a thunderstorm. And me? I was the documentarian, the one with the camera, ready to capture every moment of our epic journey. We were a perfect team, each of us bringing something essential to the table. The plan was simple, or so we thought. We would drive out early on a Monday, just as the sun was beginning to warm the high desert. We'd leave Alex's Jeep at the base of a well-known but secluded climbing spot. Then, we would make our ascent up the rock face, a climb we had practiced on smaller local formations for months. We'd spend the afternoon at the top, soaking in the view, celebrating our friendship, and dreaming about the future. It was supposed to be a day of pure joy, a perfect snapshot of youth and freedom before the real world came knocking. We felt prepared, confident, and ready for anything. We spent the weekend gathering supplies. We bought granola bars, beef jerky, and several gallons of water. We checked our climbing gear, ropes, harnesses, and carabiners meticulously, laying everything out on Alex's garage floor. The excitement was a palpable buzz that followed us everywhere. We were on the cusp of the adventure we had been waiting for our entire lives. The Flaming Gorge wasn't just a place on a map. It was a destination that represented the culmination of our childhood and the beginning of everything else. We were young, we were ready, and we believed we were completely in control of our own destiny. Monday morning arrived, bright and clear. The sky was a brilliant, cloudless blue. Alex pulled up to my house just after 6 a.m., the Jeep's engine rumbling with anticipation. The top was down, and the speakers were already blasting our favorite summer playlist. Mia and Sam were in the back, their faces lit up with grins. I tossed my pack in with the rest of the gear and hopped into the passenger seat. The journey had begun. We were officially on our way, leaving our sleepy town behind in the rearview mirror. The open road called to us, and we answered with the windows down and the music turned up loud. The drive itself was part of the adventure. We navigated the winding two-lane highways that cut through the vast, empty landscapes of Wyoming. We passed rolling hills covered in sagebrush, herds of pronghorn antelope that stared back at us with mild curiosity, and the occasional lonely ranch house. We sang along to every song, our voices carrying on the wind. We talked about everything and nothing, our funniest high school memories, our anxieties about leaving for college, and the silly, impossible things we wanted to do with our lives. The Jeep felt like a time capsule, preserving this perfect moment of friendship and freedom. As we got closer, the landscape began to transform. The flat plains gave way to dramatic red rock canyons carved by eons of wind and water. We pulled over at a designated lookout point for our first glimpse of the Flaming Gorge. It was breathtaking. The reservoir was a ribbon of impossible turquoise snaking through the fiery red cliffs that gave the place its name. The sheer scale of it was hard to comprehend. It looked like a painting, too vast and vibrant to be real. We stood there in silence for a few minutes, just taking it all in. This was what we had come for. This was the beauty and the majesty we had been chasing. Finally, we reached the turnoff Alex had marked on an old paper map. It was a rough, unmarked dirt road that would be impassable for anything but a vehicle like his Jeep. The car bounced and jostled as we drove deeper into the wilderness, kicking up a plume of red dust behind us. We were miles from the main road, completely isolated. At the time, that isolation felt like a gift. It meant we would have the entire place to ourselves. We parked the Jeep at the base of a massive, flat-topped plateau. Above us, the rock face loomed, a vertical challenge waiting to be conquered. The air was still, and the only sound was the gentle whisper of the wind. We spilled out of the Jeep, stretching our legs and surveying the climb ahead. The rock face was a tapestry of reds, oranges, and browns, just glowing under the mid-morning sun. It was so much taller up close than it had looked from a distance, honestly, a formidable wall of stone that just rose straight up into the sky. But we weren't intimidated, we were energized. This was the challenge we had been preparing for. We went through our pre-climb rituals with practiced efficiency, unpacking our gear, double-checking every knot and buckle on our harnesses. Safety was our top priority, a mantra drilled into us during our training sessions. Alex, being the most experienced climber, took the lead. He expertly secured the rope and began his ascent, finding handholds and footholds in the rock with a kind of grace that made it look easy. But trust me, it wasn't. Each movement required this combination of strength, balance, and intense focus. He called down encouragement to us, his voice echoing slightly against the stone. One by one, we followed. I clipped in and started my climb, my fingers gripping the rough, sun-warmed rock. My heart was pounding with this mixture of adrenaline and exertion. It was just me and the wall, a vertical dance against gravity. The world below us shrank with every foot we gained. Alex's Jeep became a small red toy car parked in a sea of dust and sagebrush. The vastness of the landscape opened up around us, a stunning panorama of raw, untouched wilderness. The higher we climbed, the more the silence of the desert enveloped us. The only sounds were our own breathing, the scrape of our shoes against the rock, and the occasional gust of wind whistling through the canyons. It was almost meditative, demanding complete presence in the moment. There was no room for thoughts of the past or future, only the next handhold, the next secure step. After what felt like an eternity, but was probably just over an hour, we all made it to the top. We hauled ourselves over the final ledge, collapsing onto the flat, sun-baked surface of the plateau. We were breathing heavily, our muscles ached, and we were covered in a fine layer of red dust. But we were beaming. We had done it. We had conquered the cliff. We high-fived and hugged, a wave of pure elation and pride just washing over us. The physical exhaustion was nothing compared to the overwhelming sense of accomplishment. We had faced the challenge together and emerged victorious on our own private rooftop of the world. The view from the top of the plateau was worth every ounce of effort. It was a 360-degree spectacle that stretched to the horizon in every direction. We could see for miles, across the shimmering water of the reservoir, over the endless maze of canyons, and out to the distant mountains that jaggedly pierced the sky. We felt like eagles perched in their eyrie, masters of all we surveyed. We unpacked our lunch, devouring sandwiches and granola bars with a hunger sharpened by the climb. Everything tasted better up here, amplified by the thin air and our triumphant mood. We were laughing, shouting, and feeling utterly on top of the world. We spent the next hour just being kids again. We took goofy photos, daring each other to stand closer and closer to the edge for the most dramatic shot. Sam, ever the clown, did a ridiculous victory dance that almost sent him stumbling. We recounted the toughest parts of the climb, exaggerating our struggles for comedic effect. This was the moment we had dreamed of. Just the four of us, sharing an experience that was entirely our own, forever etched into the story of our friendship. The sun was warm on our skin, a gentle breeze kept us cool, and for a while, everything was absolutely perfect. It felt like a scene from a movie, honestly, just too good to be true. Then, as Mia was pointing out a distant rock formation that looked like a face, my gaze drifted downward, back toward the base of the cliff, back toward the tiny red speck that was Alex's Jeep. Something was wrong. A second vehicle was there, a beat-up white pickup truck I didn't recognize, parked right next to ours. My heart skipped a beat. A flicker of unease, small but sharp, cut through my joyful mood. "Hey guys," I said, my voice suddenly quiet. "Who's that?" The laughter died down as everyone turned to look. We squinted, trying to make out the details from hundreds of feet above. A lone figure was walking around Alex's Jeep. A man. He was moving slowly, methodically, peering into the windows. He circled the vehicle once, then twice. He tried the driver's side door handle. It was locked. He tried the passenger side, also locked. The sense of isolation that had felt so liberating just an hour ago now felt menacing. We were completely alone out here, miles from any help. The man wasn't a tourist admiring the view. His posture was tense, his movements furtive. He was up to no good. The perfect day was suddenly fractured, and a cold, creeping dread began to replace the warmth of the sun. For a moment we were frozen, paralyzed by disbelief. This couldn't be happening. Not here, not now. Our perfect day was being invaded. The initial shock quickly gave way to a surge of protective anger. That was our stuff down there. More importantly, that was our ride home. Alex was the first to react. "Hey!" he bellowed, his voice echoing across the canyon. "Get away from our car!" The sound seemed huge in the vast emptiness, but the man below didn't even flinch. He either didn't hear us or didn't care. He continued his inspection of the Jeep, now focusing on the back tire. "Maybe he didn't hear you," Mia said, her voice trembling slightly. "Let's all yell." We gathered at the edge of the cliff, cupping our hands around our mouths. On the count of 3, we shouted in unison, "Leave it alone!" This time the man stopped. He looked up, a tiny figure shielding his eyes from the sun. He saw us. A wave of relief washed over me. He would leave now. Surely he wouldn't try anything with 4 people watching him from above. We had the high ground, a clear advantage. We felt a renewed sense of control. This was just a minor scare, a story we would laugh about later. But the man didn't leave. Instead, he gave us a lazy, mocking wave. Then he turned back to the Jeep with a renewed sense of purpose. Panic began to set in. "What do we do?" Sam asked, his usual optimism gone, replaced by a pale-faced fear. We were trapped. The only way down was the rope we had used to climb up, and that would take time. By the time we got down there, he could be long gone, with our wallets, phones, and car keys. Alex, desperate, tried to bluff. "We called the cops!" he yelled, his voice cracking with strain. "They're on their way!" It was a lie, of course. We had no cell service up here. The man's response was chilling. He stopped what he was doing, reached into the back of his truck, and pulled out a tire iron. He walked calmly to the passenger side window of the Jeep, and with a single brutal swing, shattered the glass. The sound of it breaking traveled all the way up to us, a sharp, violent crack that shattered our last hopes. Then, things got worse. He reached inside, unlocked the door, and rummaged through the glove compartment. He emerged holding a small, dark object. Even from this distance, we knew what it was. He raised the handgun and pointed it up at us. He didn't fire. He didn't have to. The message was clear. We were helpless. The sight of the gun turned our fear into pure terror. We scrambled back from the edge of the cliff, our hearts hammering against our ribs. There was nothing we could do but watch. The man, with all the time in the world, methodically emptied our backpacks, taking our wallets, Mia's camera, and the spare set of keys Alex kept in the console. He tossed our empty bags onto the dusty ground. Then, as a final act of malice, he took the tire iron and punctured the Jeep's rear tire. The hissing sound of the air escaping was like a final sigh of defeat. He got back in his truck and drove away, leaving a cloud of dust and our shattered sense of security behind him. We stood in stunned silence for what felt like an eternity. The beautiful vista that had filled us with joy just minutes before now seemed vast, empty, and threatening. The silence was no longer peaceful. It was oppressive. Anger began to bubble up through the fear. We had been violated. Our perfect day, our sacred space, had been stolen from us. It took us a long, tense hour to rappel back down the cliff. Every moment was filled with the fear that the man might come back. When we finally reached the bottom, the scene was even worse up close. Shards of glass littered the ground, and the flat tire made the Jeep look wounded and pathetic. The first task was to change the tire. Our hands shook with adrenaline as we struggled with the jack and the lug nuts. What should have been a simple 10-minute job took us almost an hour. Every sound in the desert made us jump. Was he coming back? Finally, with the spare tire on, we piled into the Jeep, the broken window letting in a cold draft of wind that mirrored the chill in our hearts. The drive back was silent. The celebratory playlist was off. No one sang. We just drove, the reality of what happened sinking in deeper with every mile that separated us from the gorge. The adventure was over. As soon as we got a sliver of cell service, we called the police. We spent the rest of the evening at the sheriff's office, giving our statements and trying to remember details about the man in his truck. But it all felt hollow. They were sympathetic, but we knew the chances of catching him were slim. Driving home that night, the world felt different. It felt darker, less trustworthy. The boundless freedom of the summer now had a sharp, dangerous edge. Our grand adventure had taught us a lesson, but not the one we expected. We learned that invincibility is an illusion, and that even in the most beautiful places, you have to be prepared for the worst. The world was still an adventure, but from that day on, we knew it was one best approached with our eyes wide open.